On a busy morning, a woman crosses the city's luxurious shopping mall with quick steps, seemingly resolving a last-minute task. Her clothes were simple, consistent with the urgency that showed in her expression. Without drawing much attention, she entered a jewelry store known for its dazzling pieces, with showcases full of diamonds and precious stones. With an attentive look, the woman focused on an elegant necklace, one of those that seemed to shine brighter than the others. While admiring it, a saleswoman observed her with suspicion. She approached and, in a formal tone, asked if the customer would like to see the piece up close. The woman, with a slight nod, asked to examine it. But, before even holding the necklace, she noticed something in the saleswoman's look, a silent judgment. What should have been a common transaction turned into an episode of prejudice. Without warning, the attendant insinuated that the woman couldn't afford that jewel. A veiled insult, but clear enough for the atmosphere in the store to change. The customer tried to keep calm, holding the necklace delicately, but was soon surprised by an unjust accusation of theft. Security was called, and public embarrassment was about to happen. The situation escalated quickly. The saleswoman, without even hearing the customer's side, accused her loudly, drawing the attention of other customers in the store. All eyes turned to the woman who, until that moment, was just trying to choose a gift. Whispers began, and some even raised their phones to record what seemed to be another scandal. Unable to explain herself, the woman was approached by a mall security guard. Mark, the security guard who was used to dealing with tense situations, calmly led her to the security room. Along the way, the woman remained silent, trying to process what had just happened. The weight of humiliation was great, but she knew that the worst was yet to come. The murmurs around her echoed as she was escorted, as if she was already condemned by the looks of others. In the security room, Mark asked her to wait while he checked the surveillance cameras. With a serious expression, he reviewed the footage and soon realized that the accusation was completely unfounded. She hadn't committed any crime, but it was too late to erase the damage that had been done. What started as a simple trip to the mall had turned into a nightmare. The woman left the mall with her head down, without revealing who she really was, without saying anything. Mark, upon reviewing the footage, felt a weight in his chest. He knew that woman had been unjustly accused, but the situation seemed to be beyond his hands. He went to her, still in the security room, and informed her that he had found no evidence of theft in the images. He apologized for the incident, but the embarrassment she had gone through was already done, and he knew that a simple apology wouldn't erase what had happened. The woman remained silent. She took a deep breath and, with dignity, thanked him. Her posture was calm, but there was an intensity in her eyes that indicated something bigger was coming. Even so, she left the room without causing more alarm, refusing to defend herself publicly. Mark watched as she left, intrigued by the serene way she had handled the whole situation. He wondered who she really was. As she left the mall, the woman felt the weight of humiliation hanging over her shoulders. She knew that what had happened to her was not an isolated event. This wasn't just about a bad experience in a luxury store, but about a structural prejudice that she, like many other people, had faced several times. However, this time, something inside her had changed. Instead of accepting the situation and moving on, she decided to investigate further. Before we continue, I want to know from you. Have you ever been in a similar situation, or do you know someone who has suffered an injustice due to prejudice? Share your story in the comments. Your story can help other people in the same situation. In the days that followed, the woman couldn't forget what had happened in that jewelry store. The image of the saleswoman, with her look of contempt, the unjust accusation, and the way she was escorted by security without even having the chance to explain herself. She knew that prejudice was not new to her, but this time something inside her couldn't simply let it go. She needed to do something, not for herself, but for all the other people who might have already gone through the same embarrassment and who, without a voice, had to accept the unfair treatment. She decided to investigate on her own. She began to talk discreetly with other mallgoers, looking for similar stories. She discovered that she wasn't the only one who had been a victim of prejudice in that place. Other people also reported being mistreated, judged by their appearance or skin color. The pattern was clear: Customers who didn't fit the luxury profile that the store expected were quickly discredited, as if their mere presence there was an affront. Over time, Sarah, the name the public still didn't know, began to form a network of testimonies. Each story reinforced the idea that something needed to be done. And as the evidence increased, her indignation turned into determination. It was time to act, but still, she continued to keep her identity secret. She knew that if she revealed who she was right at the beginning, it could change the course of events. And Sarah wanted people to understand that this situation was about something bigger, about how society judged and treated others, and not about her status or position. As Sarah continued with her investigation, a plan began to form in her mind. She didn't just want to denounce the incident she had experienced, she wanted to expose a structural problem, a prejudice that was hidden behind the luxurious facades of that mall. However, for her denunciation to have an impact, she knew she would need to gather more evidence, more stories that would show the pattern of discrimination that often went unnoticed. With the help of Mark, the security guard who had reviewed the footage on the day of the incident, Sarah began to talk to mall employees. At first, many were reluctant to speak, afraid of losing their jobs or facing retaliation. But over time, Mark managed to convince some to share their experiences. Many reported episodes where customers were treated disrespectfully because of their appearance, especially when they didn't show obvious signs of wealth. Sarah began to be seen regularly in the mall, always in silence, observing. Each time she visited a new store, she felt the discomfort in some looks, the same mistrust with which she had been treated on the day of the jewelry store incident. Little by little, she gathered the pieces of a puzzle that evidenced the elitist and exclusionary culture that permeated that space. But something was still missing for her revelation to be complete. Finally, after weeks of investigation, Sarah gathered a complete dossier with testimonies from customers and employees, as well as security camera footage that proved the prejudice in the store. Everything was ready for her next step. It was time to expose the truth, but in a way that no one would expect. And now, I want to know from you. Who do you think Sarah is and why is she gathering so much information? Share your opinion in the comments and at the end tell me again if you were right. With the dossier in hand, Sarah knew she was about to take a big step. That mall, which she knew so well, was about to be exposed for its true face. Still, she chose not to reveal her identity immediately. She wanted the focus to be on the problem and not on who she was. Her intention was to show that discrimination could happen to anyone, regardless of status or appearance. She decided that the most effective way to do this would be in a meeting with the mall executives. Mark, who was now one of her main allies, helped organize the meeting, ensuring that all directors would be present. The atmosphere was tense on the day of the meeting. News of the jewelry store incident had spread, but no one suspected that Sarah, a discreet and always so reserved figure, was behind the investigation. At the meeting, she began to present the testimonies and evidence she had gathered. The silence in the room was palpable. As the directors heard the stories of discrimination, many became uncomfortable. No one knew who this woman was who presented herself only as an unsatisfied customer. But as she proceeded with the presentation, a truth became increasingly clear. The mall had a deep problem that needed to be solved. It was only at the end of the presentation that Sarah made the revelation that would change the course of everything. Calmly, she removed a document from her bag and placed it on the table, and a photo with her resume appeared on the presentation screen. And it was her true identity. Sarah was not just an ordinary, unsatisfied customer, but one of the co-owners of that mall. The impact was immediate. The shocked looks of the executives turned to her. How had someone in her position gone through that? And more importantly, why had she kept her identity secret until that moment? The executives were silent, surprised by the revelation. They couldn't understand how Sarah, one of the mall's co-owners, had gone unnoticed and suffered such humiliation. The embarrassment was visible on each of their faces. Sarah took the moment to explain, "If this happened to me, who am one of the owners of this place, imagine what other people are facing daily, without a voice, without power, being judged only by appearance." Sarah's words penetrated deeply, hitting the core of the issue she had been trying to expose from the beginning. She didn't want her status to be the focus, but rather the discriminatory behavior that was happening in the stores. Her experience only proved that prejudice didn't choose victims based on class or wealth, but on deep-rooted stereotypes and veiled prejudices. She demanded changes. Internal policies needed to be implemented immediately, and stores should undergo rigorous training to ensure that all customers were treated with respect, regardless of their appearance. She also suggested creating an anonymous platform where customers could report discrimination or mistreatment without fear of retaliation. Her stance was firm and unwavering. The directors, still shocked by the revelation and the force of her speech, knew they couldn't ignore the request. There was no denying the depth of the problem. The changes Sarah demanded were not only necessary but also urgent. She wasn't just protecting her reputation as a partner, but paving the way for other people not to go through the same humiliations that she and so many others had already suffered. The executives, visibly disconcerted, began to agree with Sarah. Each knew that her demands were legitimate and that ignoring them would only aggravate the situation. The impact of the case was already taking on greater proportions on social media, and the mall's image was at risk. The pressure Sarah exerted was exactly what they needed to act, but now they were aware that the issue was much deeper than a simple image crisis. Sarah, with her unwavering determination, also knew that this was just the beginning. The immediate changes she demanded were not just a correction of behavior, but a transformation in how the mall should operate. It was necessary to ensure that each customer, regardless of their appearance or financial situation, felt respected and welcome. She then proposed a series of measures that went beyond internal policies and training. She suggested the creation of a diversity committee, composed of employees and community representatives, which would be responsible for monitoring compliance with the new rules and listening to customers' concerns. Sarah knew that to create real change, the environment also needed to reflect this new culture. She suggested that the mall start giving more visibility to brands from local entrepreneurs and minority entrepreneurs, so that the space would be more inclusive and truly represent the diversity of the city. The idea was simple: transform the mall into a symbol of welcome and inclusion, a place where everyone felt represented. The directors, who at the beginning of the meeting were hesitant and surprised, were now convinced. They agreed to all of Sarah's proposals. The impact of her words had completely changed the course of the mall's management. But for Sarah, this wasn't just a moment of personal victory. It was a broader transformation. She knew there was more to come. With the changes accepted by the executives, Sarah left the meeting knowing that this was just the first step in a much longer journey. The mall, which before seemed to be a symbol of exclusivity and inaccessible luxury, was now in a process of transformation. However, the real transformation, she knew, would come from the impact these changes would have on people. In the days that followed, news that Sarah, one of the mall's owners, had been a victim of prejudice began to spread. Social media was full of discussions about the case. The public was surprised to discover who she was, and even more so, by the way she chose to act in silence, investigating and exposing prejudice without revealing her position. She could have used her influence from the beginning to avoid humiliation, but she preferred to use the event to promote significant change that would benefit other people in the future. The public response was overwhelming. Many came to see Sarah as a symbol of strength and resilience. She could have kept quiet or accepted a private apology, but her decision to face the issue head-on and promote changes transformed her into a leadership figure. Customers and employees began to feel more comfortable reporting their own experiences, knowing that they would now have a platform to be heard and that there would be real action from the mall's management. The weeks that followed were marked by visible transformations in the mall. Sensitivity training was conducted rigorously, and employees began to treat each customer in a more welcoming and respectful manner. The atmosphere of the place began to change, reflecting Sarah's vision of an inclusive and fair space. Brands from small local entrepreneurs and minority entrepreneurs began to occupy the corridors, bringing diversity and authenticity to the space. The mall, which before seemed distant to many, was now becoming a reflection of the community. As the mall began to reflect these changes, Sarah continued her mission. She knew that, although structural transformations were important, the emotional and social impact was even greater. The prejudice she had faced, and that so many other people lived daily, wouldn't disappear just with policies. It took a continuous effort to transform the mentality of those who operated the system. Sarah began organizing events within the mall, creating opportunities for different voices to be heard. She brought speakers from various areas to talk about equality, respect, and empathy. Workshops were set up for employees and customers, teaching about the importance of diversity and how to combat daily prejudices. Each event attracted more people, and the mall became a meeting point for constructive discussions, not just a place for shopping. During one of these events, Sarah shared for the first time the complete story of her experience. About how, on an ordinary day, dressed simply to solve a quick task before a trip, she was treated as someone who didn't deserve to be there. At that moment, I could have revealed who I was and put an end to that humiliation. But I chose to live what so many other people face daily. Prejudice doesn't see status or power, it just acts. And that's what we need to change, she said firmly. The audience applauded, moved by her honesty and courage. But the impact of Sarah's words went beyond. She wasn't just telling a personal story, but offering a new vision for everyone. Her journey had transformed the mall into a place of inclusion, but it also served as inspiration for others to find strength in adversity. After that event, Sarah's words echoed throughout the community. People who previously avoided the mall because they felt out of place began to return, attracted by the new atmosphere of respect and welcome. Customers from all backgrounds now saw themselves reflected in the showcases, brands, and events that promoted diversity. The mall had ceased to be a symbol of exclusion and had transformed into a point of unity. Sarah, however, knew that her work was just beginning. While the changes in the mall were visible, there was a deeper emotional impact to be explored. She decided to create a campaign to help those who, like her, had faced situations of discrimination and prejudice, but who didn't have the emotional resources or support necessary to move forward. Her idea was simple: create a safe space where people could share their stories and receive psychological and social support. With the help of experts, Sarah launched the Hear My Voice project, an emotional support center for people who had gone through situations of exclusion or prejudice, offering a space for conversations, workshops, and most importantly, acceptance. The project quickly gained notoriety, and many people who felt lost found a new path through the work that Sarah and her team were doing. Listening is the first step to transform, was the project's motto, and more people were opening up, sharing their stories of overcoming and pain. If you've made it this far, you've already realized how transformative Sarah's journey was, right? Stories like this show us the importance of giving voice to those who need to be heard. If you like this content, subscribe to the channel to follow more inspiring stories like this one. The next video might be exactly what you're looking for. During one of the center's meetings, a young woman approached Sarah and told her that, for a long time, she had thought about giving up on life. She had gone through so many situations of rejection and humiliation that she no longer saw purpose in continuing. But upon hearing Sarah's story, something changed inside her. "You showed me that pain can be transformed into strength. I was on the edge of the abyss, but now I see that life still has something to offer. Thank you for helping me see this," said the young woman, with tears in her eyes. Those words deeply touched Sarah. Although she had already helped many people throughout her journey, hearing directly how her experience had saved someone was an impact she couldn't forget. At that moment, she realized that her mission went far beyond the walls of the mall. It was about offering people a new chance to see life in a different way, showing that, even in the darkest moments, there is still light. The following days were marked by a series of events that showed the power of the impact Sarah was generating. The Hear My Voice project gained even more visibility and, along with it, the voice of many people who, until then, had been silenced. Mall employees, who previously were afraid to talk about their own experiences of discrimination, began to feel more confident in sharing their stories, knowing that they were now in a safe and respectful environment. One of the most powerful moments happened when Sarah organized an event in the mall itself, inviting not only customers, but also employees and entrepreneurs from the region to talk about their struggles and challenges in a world that often judges them by appearance or possessions. On stage, stories of overcoming moved all those present. Salespeople, businesspeople, security guards, and customers united to share how they had faced prejudice and discrimination and how, now, they felt they belonged in that place. Sarah also gave voice to those who, like the young woman who had approached her, were on the verge of giving up. In her speech, she made sure to remind everyone that, even when everything seems lost, there is always a new opportunity to start over. Pain does not define who we are. It can shape us, teach us, and strengthen us. But never let it extinguish the flame of life within you, she said, with tears in her eyes, remembering her own journey. The transformation that Sarah promoted didn't stop just at emotional speeches or inclusive events. Every word she uttered reverberated in the daily actions of those around her. The impact of the Hear My Voice project grew unexpectedly, gaining attention not only locally, but also from organizations and groups focused on social inclusion. Sarah's name began to be associated with strength, resilience, and empathy, and people from different places began to seek her out to hear her advice and be inspired by her story. As the mall became a symbol of welcome and respect, Sarah continued her mission with impressive humility. She actively participated in the changes, not just as a public figure, but as someone who personally monitored the progress of each initiative she had proposed. As she walked through the corridors, employees greeted her with genuine respect, aware that this woman had transformed their lives in a concrete way. One day, while strolling through the mall with Mark, the security guard who had become her ally, she stopped in front of the jewelry store where it all began. The store was now completely different. The team had been renewed, and new employees were trained to ensure that no one else would go through the experiences that Sarah and so many others had faced. Looking at the place, Mark commented, "Funny how sometimes it takes a single event to change everything. If someone had told me this would happen, I would never have believed it." Sarah smiled slightly, but her mind was far away. She was thinking about how many people, like that young woman she had helped, were losing hope. People who, because of a traumatic experience, were thinking about giving up. But she knew that if she had the power to reach them, she could offer a new perspective. Have you ever noticed that change never comes from just one person? All of this happened because several voices started speaking, she replied, with eyes full of gratitude. It was then that Sarah had a new idea. She decided to take the Hear My Voice project beyond the boundaries of the mall. She began to plan a support network, with listening and welcoming centers in different neighborhoods, offering a space where people could seek emotional help and advice to restart their lives. If we can transform a mall, we can transform entire cities, she thought. Sarah began to expand her vision. She knew that the impact of the Hear My Voice project could reach many more people. She didn't limit herself to the mall environment, which had already been transformed into a symbol of inclusion and respect. Her new goal was to create community centers in various regions of the city where people could find emotional support, professional guidance, and most importantly, a safe space to talk about their challenges and pains. These centers, inspired by the project that started in the mall, would be welcoming environments, led by volunteer professionals who, like Sarah, believed in the importance of listening and offering support to people facing prejudices, traumas, and hopelessness. Sarah began to mobilize entrepreneurs, psychologists, social workers, and activists who volunteered to help. With the growing support network, the project quickly gained traction and began to be discussed in city councils and broader social initiatives. However, while the expansion of the project brought new life to the city, Sarah faced another battle, balancing the success of her initiatives with the personal challenges that arose as she became a public figure. Even being a strong woman, there were moments when the weight of expectations and emotional pressure deeply affected her. On a quiet night, sitting on the terrace of her house, Sarah reflected on the path she had traveled. She knew that many people now saw her as an inspiration, but sometimes she felt lonely on the journey. It was then that her husband, John, found her lost in thought. "You're carrying the world on your shoulders, Sarah. It's incredible what you're doing, but you need to take care of yourself too," he said in a concerned but affectionate tone. She looked at him and smiled, knowing John was right. "I know. It's just that sometimes it's hard to disconnect. There's so much to be done, so many people who need support." John hugged her and reminded her that she wasn't alone in this mission. He and many others were there to help, to share the burden. And Sarah, even with all the responsibility she carried, knew it was true. "You've already done more than many people would do in a lifetime." Remember that to help others, you also need to be well, John said. That conversation made her realize something important. No matter the size of the mission, we all need a support network. The project she had created for others also applied to her. Knowing that she could count on the people around her gave her strength to continue, but with more balance. She began to delegate more responsibilities and trust her team. The journey was long, but it didn't need to be traveled alone. With the expansion of the Hear My Voice support centers and the growing network of volunteers, Sarah began to realize the true reach of her mission. The stories that emerged from those seeking help were profound, full of challenges, traumas, and sometimes hopelessness. But at the same time, there was something in common in each of these people: the search for a second chance, for a new perspective on life. The idea of giving up often crossed their minds, but the project offered a turning point. The community centers became more than just welcoming spaces. They became points of personal transformation. Sarah made sure to be present in many of these spaces, listening to people up close, sharing her own story, and showing that even people who seem to have everything under control face moments of doubt and pain. Her presence inspired and brought hope to those who, for a long time, felt invisible. Many who had reached their limit, on the verge of giving up, found in Sarah an example of overcoming. One of these stories deeply impacted Sarah. During a session at the support center in a peripheral neighborhood, a woman named Claire, with tired eyes and drooping shoulders, told her story. She had lost her job, faced financial difficulties, and no longer saw reasons to keep fighting. She was on the verge of giving up on her own life. Listening to Claire, Sarah felt an echo of her own journey. The discrimination, prejudice, and lack of opportunities that Claire had faced were a harsh reality, but through the project, Sarah knew exactly what to say. "I know what it's like to feel invisible," Sarah said tenderly. "I know what it's like to feel that the world is against you, that no one sees your value. But you're not alone. Me, you, all of us have something in common. The strength we haven't yet discovered we have." Sarah's words, coming from someone who had gone through so many difficulties and risen again, were a balm for Claire. Little by little, Claire began to frequent the center more, connecting with other people and finding emotional and practical support. Claire's transformation was one of many stories that began to emerge in the centers. People who had reached their limit, who thought about giving up, now saw a light at the end of the tunnel. They found support not only in words but in the network of people around them. Sarah saw that her project was creating a wave of hope and new beginnings. The impact of Hear My Voice began to go beyond emotional support. Local entrepreneurs began to offer job opportunities, volunteer networks began to financially support the initiatives, and the project participants themselves began to help each other, creating a solidarity network that Sarah had never imagined. The project was growing faster than she had anticipated. With the Hear My Voice project gaining strength, Sarah realized that her vision of transforming lives had grown far beyond what she had imagined. Each support center that emerged represented a new opportunity for people to find strength and rebuild their lives. The impact was not just local. Social media, which once exposed the incident at the mall, was now the stage where stories of overcoming spread. Claire, and so many other people who had found a new path, were living examples that change was possible. Sarah, however, knew that there was still much to be done. Even with the advances, she daily encountered new stories of people on the verge of giving up. Each new face, each new story of pain and overcoming reinforced her belief that the strength of a community lay in the connections they created among themselves. And it was with this thought that she decided to expand the project even further. Now, Sarah wanted to take Hear My Voice beyond the city's borders. She began to seek partnerships with other institutions, companies, and local governments so that support centers could be installed in different states. Her goal was ambitious: to create a national network of emotional and practical support for those who felt invisible or hopeless. The response was positive. People from different regions began to join the initiative, and the project, which started in a single mall, began to spread across the country. Sarah was also invited to participate in forums and conferences on mental health, social inclusion, and entrepreneurship. Her story was inspiring, and people wanted to hear how someone who had faced prejudice managed to transform pain into action and, more importantly, into change. At these events, she always remembered the importance of listening and welcoming. We all, at some point, need to be heard. And often, that's all someone needs to find strength and continue, Sarah said in her speeches. At one of these conferences, after sharing her journey, a young woman approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. "I was so close to giving up, until I heard your story," said the young woman, moved. "Now I see that there is a way that I can start over." These words resonated deeply with Sarah. Every time a new person found hope through her story, she felt that her mission was being fulfilled. She had always believed that what started as a personal struggle was, in fact, part of something bigger. As the months passed, Sarah also received support from influential personalities, public figures who were touched by the cause and helped give visibility to the project. The Hear My Voice movement not only helped people emotionally but also became a milestone in the fight for inclusion and equality. The project began to be nationally recognized as a powerful initiative that promoted dignity and respect. Now that the Hear My Voice project was growing nationally, Sarah found herself involved in an ever larger support network. People from all over sought guidance and inspiration in her story. What started as a mission to transform the mall where she suffered discrimination had now become a movement of national proportions. With each new city that inaugurated a support center, Sarah made sure to be present. She wanted to ensure that the essence of her mission wasn't lost, that each person knew they weren't alone. On one of these trips, Sarah met a young man named Peter. He was sitting in the corner of the room at one of the new centers, clearly uncomfortable amidst the conversation. When Sarah approached to talk, he revealed that he was there at his mother's insistence, who feared he was sinking into depression. Peter had lost his job and, over time, isolated himself, feeling he had no more strength to continue. In his words, the weight was too much. He said he had already thought about taking his own life, but something brought him to that place. Sarah, with the same calmness and empathy she always showed, listened to Peter attentively. She knew those words came from a deep place of pain. "You don't need to carry this weight alone, Peter," she said. "Here, we're going to help you find a way to make all this lighter." Peter, who was initially reluctant, began to frequent the center more regularly, participating in activities and meeting people who, like him, faced silent internal battles. Little by little, he began to open up more, finding support in the conversations and connections he was building. Peter's case was just one of many that Sarah closely followed. With each story of overcoming, she saw the real impact her work was generating. From the support they found in the centers, many people began to see new opportunities arise. Entrepreneurs, touched by the cause, began to offer job vacancies to those who would otherwise be marginalized. Hear My Voice was no longer just an emotional support project. It had become a bridge between emotional recovery and social reintegration. As the movement gained more relevance, Sarah realized the need to strengthen support networks. She began to create professional training programs within the centers themselves, offering courses in partnership with local companies. The goal was simple: to give not only emotional support but practical tools for people to start over. With these programs, many of those who attended the centers left with new life perspectives, ready to rebuild their journeys. Before we go to the end, have you already left your like on this video? This helps us reach more people with relevant content. Like now so we can continue bringing stories that touch and inspire. As the months passed, Sarah continued her journey, dedicating herself body and soul to Hear My Voice. The project had become more than she imagined, impacting lives in ways she could not have foreseen. But at the same time, she knew that the work she was doing wouldn't solve all problems immediately or conveniently. Some emotional wounds were deep, and the path to overcoming would be long for many who attended the centers. And Sarah accepted that. She understood that her mission was not to offer magical solutions, but to provide a space where people could begin to see new possibilities. Peter's case, for example, was a constant reminder of this. Even after months of attending the center, he still struggled against his inner demons, sometimes feeling unable to move forward. There were days when he would close off again, but he always found a way to return to the center, where Sarah and the team's welcome helped him regain control, one step at a time. Sarah began to accept that each person's healing process was unique. Not everyone would quickly find a solution to their pains, and that was okay. She knew that the impact she caused was subtle and often invisible, like a seed planted in someone's heart that could bloom at any moment, sometimes long after her words had been heard. Looking back, she recognized how far she had come since that fateful day in the mall's jewelry store. The pain of humiliation she had felt had been transformed into something greater, something that would change not only her life but that of thousands of people. However, Sarah also understood that her work would never have a definitive end. The fight against prejudice, discrimination, and hopelessness was constant, and she was prepared to continue. On one of her last visits to the support center she had helped inaugurate, Sarah walked through the corridors, observing the conversations between participants, the smiles, and the exchanges of stories. It was a lively environment, full of welcome. There, she found Claire, now a volunteer in the project, helping other people with their own journeys of overcoming. Seeing her, Sarah felt a wave of pride and emotion. Claire, who was previously on the brink of despair, now offered the same support she had once received. "You were the beginning of all this," Claire said, smiling at Sarah. "I wouldn't be here if you hadn't believed in me." Sarah just nodded, wordless. It wasn't about her, after all. It was about what those people were building together, about the strength that each of them discovered within themselves. The Hear My Voice project had grown because they believed in the power of acceptance and listening. As the sun began to set, Sarah left the center with the certainty that her journey would continue, but with the tranquility of knowing that the impact had already been planted. The road ahead was still long, and many challenges would come, but the strength of the community, support, and resilience were now more present than ever. That night, upon returning home, Sarah sat in the garden and looked at the starry sky. The weight she once carried on her shoulders had transformed into something lighter. She didn't need to solve everything alone, and she had finally accepted that. The project, the people, the stories, all of this was a constant reminder that, even in the darkest moments, there is a way out. And sometimes, all someone needs is for their voice to be heard. Finally, Sarah's story shows us that even in the most difficult moments, there is always hope. So, tell me, have you ever imagined that you could help someone simply by listening? Leave your comment and share how you believe small actions can transform lives. Thank you for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.